Hey guys, my name is Aaron from Geeky Development and welcome to our Xcode tutorials. In this tutorial, we're going to be learning all about WebView applications within the Swift language. Now before we jump straight into this, if you enjoy this tutorial and want to further your knowledge and learning ability, why not enroll in one of the many courses we have available on iOS development. All links for these will be down below in the description. But let's jump straight in to the tutorial. Now we're going to be going on to creating our very own WebView application. What we're going to be creating is a fully featured internet browser, just like Safari. We're going to give our users the ability to load external websites directly within the application. Give them search bars so they can search for their websites, and even all the basic functionality like going back, forward, refreshing, and even stopping to load the page. Now we're going to be creating this application in the next few lectures, and what it's going to involve us doing in this one is first setting up the application, the interface, getting all the objects in that we need, and having the ability to have web pages load up. Once you've got that down, we're then going to add in all the functionality for the buttons, and in the next lecture and the one after that, we're going to talk about activity indicators and implementing our search bar. Now the great thing about displaying websites within your application, it means not only does it give your app more functionality, but if you want to display a website, maybe you want to show your own website or maybe your Facebook page or your Twitter, rather than linking them directly to it and sending them outside of the app to another app, why don't we add the functionality into our own app, giving more user time, more functionality? So if you can implement it into your own app, there's no need to make your user go elsewhere. So what we're going to do is jump straight into our main.storyboard here, where we're going to build and set up our interface for this application. So I'll get rid of our sidebar here, so we've got a little bit more room to work with. So what we're going to do then is we're going to add in all the objects. Now all the objects we're going to be adding in, not all of them we're going to add the functionality to in this lecture. We'll do those in the next ones, but we're going to set up the interface. We're going to make it universal so it resizes and works on all different screen types and devices. So bring up our library now for our objects. Now move this over to the side there so we can clearly see it. So first things first then, we're going to drag and drop in a simple web view, which is now known as a WK web view. So if I type in web view here, you'll see here the previous one is now deprecated. We no longer use that. We use the WebKit view. So we drag and drop that in, and by default it's black, but don't worry about that too much because we're going to change the color and everything of it anyway to make it look really, really good. We're also going to add in a simple search bar. So type at the top now. Search, and bring in our search bar. We'll drag and drop that in and we'll place it to the top there. We'll do something pretty special with it in just a moment and make this application look really, really good. Now the buttons that I want to use to enable us to interact with the web view, I want them to be on the toolbar at the very bottom. So we're going to change how this view is being displayed and how it's presented to the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to embed it in a navigation controller. I'm not using that for the purpose of having a navigation controller to switch to and from views. It's just so I can set it up to have bars top and bottom. So once you select it on the view here, we go all the way down here to our embed option and then select navigation controller. And that will embed it inside the navigation controller, but the most important thing is it enables us to use the bars up and above the screen. So select the navigation controller here and I'll bring up this side panel once more and go to the attributes inspector. At the top bar, I'm going to select none because by default it gives us that navigation bar. That's not what I want on this. What I do want is to work with our bottom bar. So here I'm going to choose it to be a opaque toolbar. There we go. And I add a toolbar at the bottom there which I can now interact with to add in all of our objects. So get rid of our sidebar at the minute there so we can continue to work with this. And what I want to do now is bring up our objects again. And we're going to type in bar button item, which is just here. And I'm going to simply drag and drop it in there. And what I do, I simply quickly select it, copy it and paste it so we got 4 in total. So I've now placed in, as you can see on the left hand side here, 4 bar button items within our toolbars item. So they're now all inside of this. And we want to kind of change how each one is being displayed. So this item here, which is our first one, if I zoom in so you can see it, we'll bring up our side panel once more. We're going to change each style of it. Now, these are the 4 buttons. You're going to have one to go back, one to go forward, one to refresh, and one to stop loading. Just 4 of the most basic web controls that you would see on any browser, on mobile, or even on the desktop. So the first one's going to be our go back button. Now you can either choose to name them yourself or use your own images. It's really entirely up to you. But I'm going to use some of the kind of basic ones that kind of Xcode gives us to work with. So in the style here, we leave this to kind of as it is right now. We don't need to change that. But system item, this is where we change what it can look like. So if I selected the rewind option, it kind of simulates the go back button, which is kind of cool. Do the same again for this one, and this one could be the fast forward. Our next one, we can make this one be the refresh button. So we got a refresh option just there. And then finally our last one, we'll choose that to be our stop. Now again, you can use your own images. If you want to use your own images, make sure they're a PNG format with a transparent background and just add them. You can see here the bar item here, we can add titles, images and stuff like that. That's simply where you add them in. But what I want to do now then is make these two buttons stay where they are, but these two buttons, the refresh and stop, to be on the right side. Now, unfortunately, I can't drag and drop them over. I have to use what's known as, if I go up to here now, and get rid of that. If I scroll down, because if you scroll down to the bottom, that's where you get most of the kind of objects that you place within toolbars. And we want to use the flexible space bar button item. Now by dragging and drop that in between the two there, it pushes them to overside, so they kind of, it stretches them out. So it pushes them to the very end, to the edges of the view. And it's a really good way of controlling how the objects get displayed. So that looks pretty cool, doesn't it? If I zoom out a little bit now, you can see we've got these buttons now added in, which look really, really cool. Now, we haven't had any constraints in at the moment, but what I'm going to do is drag and now drop then our kind of WebKit here, our web view, space it out completely full screen, and it is black, and I don't really want it to be black because when it loads up, it's going to be black before the website loads up. So in the side panel here, we'll change the background here from its kind of this dark grey black colour. We'll choose it to be white. Just so it looks a lot more cleaner, a lot more professional when the application builds and runs. And then we've got our search bar at the top here. Now this can get a little tricky at times because of how it's positioned and how we're placing it in. We do have a little space at the top, and that's all down to the fact that we have a status bar. But also, you got to think of when you're designing these interfaces now, we got to take the iPhone X into account. Now, if I did kind of simulate what it looked like on the iPhone X, it doesn't look that good, as you can now see, does it? It doesn't really. So what I can do is resize, we'll bring this down here. We'll design it on the iPhone X simulator to begin with. So if I place the kind of search bar there underneath the notch, and then bring our web view up there, bring it all the way down to the bottom, right there, and that's kind of how it's going to look. But then again, the kind of buttons at the bottom here, they go under the home button. So how is it we can fix that and sort that out? Well, what we want to do then, if I just quickly go to Builder and see how it would look on the simulator anyway, we want to change how it gets positioned, and we want to make sure that nothing goes underneath our bars. And this is kind of how it looks. So even though it does look like it goes underneath, don't worry. When you want to build one in a simulator, it's above the home button. And more importantly, the search bar is below the notch. So if we use this then as our kind of base plate here and add in our constraints, get rid of these panels here so we can clearly see. There we go. We're first going to select them because we don't need to add constraints to the actual toolbar at the bottom because that's an object of the navigation controller. What we can do is select our two objects here and then pin them all the edges around them and add in those 7 constraints. So by doing that, I haven't really touched anything else. I haven't told it to do anything else. And when I do resize it, let's say we go back to the original screen that we were kind of creating our interface on, this is how it looks. But the only kind of downside is the fact that the status bar there, if I build and run again once more, the status bar is kind of like the area of the background is white because that's the background underneath the application. Now I could do something cool like changing the background color to be like kind of fit in with this. But there's also really cool design options we can do also. So let's play around with the design then. We've got the constraints in, it moves perfectly fine. I'm quite happy with that. So the search bar then, we can change the color of it. Now the search style here is by default. We have the bar style here, we can change it to black or anything like that. We can even have it translucent, which we can remove or add. Or the bar tint, we can even change like a dark grey. And look how it kind of changes stuff now. If I get rid of that, the translucent option there and do a black status bar style, it looks really, really cool. And if we run with that theme and select the view of the background here and change that to be the dark grey. Now remember, the only thing that changes the background, the web view at the top is currently white, but it changes, as you can see right now, and makes the toolbar at the bottom a little bit darker. Now one thing to solve that would be, if I click on this here, the toolbar and the navigation controller, or click on the actual view itself, because that's where you have the options, it's opaque. We can change it to translucent, anything like that, but the main thing is we want to make it a solid color. So I can choose opaque black toolbar, but we don't really want that. It's kind of misleading because even though it changes color, it doesn't actually change color, if that makes sense. Like if I go to build and run now, what you'll see now then is not only does the search bar at the top look really, really good, but it stays kind of solid white at the bottom. So it is kind of misleading. So why don't we theme this then to be the same as the search bar section at the top? I think that would look really, really cool. So what we're going to do is select the toolbar here, or the kind of, we have to actually do it within the toolbar kind of navigation controller there. And in this, we're going to change the bar tint to that dark grey, which doesn't really update as much here. And then the tint color, we're going to change, let's change this to white, which then should change all of our buttons. Now, if it doesn't do this, it's kind of weird how it all sets up, because even though you can change and adjust those options there, sometimes it don't work because you have to select the navigation controller over all, which this time it worked fine. It's just weird how it doesn't do it in the interface builder. I think to make it update in the interface builder, you have to select this overall. But then again, you can't really choose the option. So it's kind of weird how you don't see update there, but when it comes to building and running, it updates perfectly fine. And how cool and unique does this interface look? So we're missing a few options then, and one of those is our activity indicator, but we'll add that in the next lecture anyway. So let's quickly change the status bar to white to fit within the rest of the theme before we get our first web page to load up. So to do this then, we're going to go straight to our project name at the top here, and then go straight down to our deployment info and change our status bar style here to light. And because we do that, we need to make our project aware of it by going to our info.plist. We're going to click on the very bottom line and press enter and type in our capital V for view controller base status bar appearance. There we go. And it automatically sets the boolean to no, which is what we want. We don't want that appearance style. We're going to customize it ourselves. So now when we build and run, we'll have a nice white status bar to fit in with the theme of our application. And there you go. Looks pretty cool, doesn't it? So it kind of looks like the private or the incognito tab that you kind of have within Safari. It does look really, really cool. So then what we're going to do next then is add in all the actions and outlets that we need then to start getting our web view to load up and have the ability to control it with our buttons at the bottom. So we're going to jump straight back then into our main.storyboard. What we do, we get rid of our kind of panels there. So we've got a more full screen effect, and we're going to bring up our assistant editor. So in here then, once I selected on the view, we're going to space out our outlet section. And we're going to first start by selecting our web view, right click or drag and drop it over, and select it as an outlet, and I'll simply call it our web view and connect that up. Now straight away we're going to get a warning in the project, and this is because it can't reference the WK web kind of view within our application. Because what we need to do is we need to import a framework that allows us to use all the capabilities to load up websites within our app. But we'll get into that in just a moment. We're going to add the rest of the kind of objects now in, and the rest of the objects happens to be the 4 actions for our buttons. So drop down our toolbar items, and we'll start with our rewind. So drag it, or control and click, or right click and drag and drop it over. And we'll name this one simply our back button as an action. Connect it up. Next, our fast forward, which is our forward button. Add that in. Again, as an action, and connect it up. And do this one for the remaining 2. So this is going to be our refresh. Once again, as an action, connect it all in. And then if we do a little bit of spacing, finally our stop button, drag and drop that in, call it our stop, as an action, and connect that up. Perfect. So we've got them all in then. I'll go back to our standard editor, and then we'll jump straight into our viewcontrol.swift so we can see them in greater detail. And now we've got our 4 buttons added in here, ready to go. We've got our web view outlet added in with, again, our warning, and because we can't reference the WK web view. So again, this is because to use web views and these web kits in our applications, we have to import the framework into this class. The frameworks, they have all the capabilities that we need to load up websites. All we got to do is reference them, use their capabilities to make this stuff work. So how we do it? We go to our project name at the very top here, and we're going to go straight now to our build phases. In our build phases here, we're going to drop down our link binary of libraries, and in this little plus symbol that we press, this has every framework that we're able to add into our Xcode project to use all of its capabilities. Now if you just type in web and then select the webkit.framework and add that in, that's now imported into our project. But it doesn't end there. Now we've got it imported into our project. You'll see the framework folder now filled up with that one framework. We go back to our viewcontroller.swift and we still have this warning. And that's because we need to make this class aware that this framework is now in our project. We need to import it in so we can reference it. So where we have our import of our UI kit here, just under it, our new line, we type in our import and we're going to be importing then our WebKit into the class. So by importing it, now it can be used to be referenced, and that gets rid of that warning. So now it's in, we can use it and all its capabilities to make the websites display within our application. So we're going to set up in the view did load now. As soon as the application loads up, just to load up a basic website, we'll probably pick something like simple like Google. So we're going to space out our view did load here. And in here, we need to set up the capabilities then. So first then, we need to allocate a URL that we want to display. So we need to set it up in a string format. Then we need to request the URL to be loaded up within our web view. So let's start with the first thing then, which is actually getting the website that we want. So I'll create a let here variable, and I'll call it our URL. And that's going to equal, it's going to basically equal to a string, so we can add in the URL, but we have to format it in a URL string. So we type in URL, because that's what it ultimately is going to be, and it's going to be of a string value. So we do 2 quotation marks, and we're going to type in now the web address for Google. So you have to do the full web address, so http://www.google.com. There we go, that's our full URL. So that's now all linked into our URL. So we reference URL anywhere within this project, it's now going to be linked back to this URL formatted string. So now we need to request this URL in the application to load it up within our web view. So create another let, and I'll call this one our request. And this is going to be equaling to a URL request. And again, that's going to link back to a URL. And the URL it's going to link to is the let that we created called URL. So you can kind of see how now this is working back on itself. So I misspelled URL there. So URL, and then we end that there with a bracket. Now we probably get another warning pop up here, and that's because there's no optional value. Because we created it as a let there, this is something that's not going to change when the view loads up, so we can finish it up with that exclamation mark there. So now then, we've requested the URL, which is linking back to our URL, and we now have another little warning. And that's just solely saying that we're not referencing request anywhere else within the code. So now we can call upon our web view, which is the name of the outlet that we added in up above for our web view kit. And then what we do then is do dot and select the attribute that we want to adjust, which is load. So we selected the web view, we've chose the load attribute, and what we're going to be loading up within it is going to be our request. So you can see how now it all links back to one another till it eventually calls upon our string. And that's pretty much all you need to do there in terms of coding it to make the web view load up a website. But it still won't load up the website, because one of the security features within kind of this application development is the fact that by default you don't have access for the full internet. As a developer, you need to implement and change how the application reads the information to give our users unrestricted web access. So even though I've built and run, the website still does not load up. So we need to change our application transport security settings to allow it to load up external websites. So to do this then, I'll get rid of our debug area at the bottom. We go straight into our info.plist. And where we add in that line to our view controller based status bar appearance, we press enter to add in a new one and type in a capital A for app transport security settings. So when you add that in, click the little drop down menu and then press the little plus symbol. And we want to select now the allow arbitrary loads. So once you've added that in, the boolean here, we want to adjust this and change this to yes, all capitals. So by allowing it to yes, it gives our user unrestricted web access. So back within our main.storyboard, our viewcontroller.swift, where we had our code in now. I haven't changed any of the code, and you've seen before when I built and when it didn't load it. By adding that to our plist, now when we load up the application, again, just give it a minute or two depending on your internet connection, but now Google loads up. And we can interact with it, as you can now see. You can scroll up and down. I could type in on here and type in Apple, and then search it just like a normal web view. But the only problem is now then if I wanted to go back, our buttons don't work. So we need to add in the functionality for these stuff to implement what we want. So it's kind of cool, isn't it? So for some reason our keyboard doesn't fully load up at the bottom, which is kind of weird. There we go. So sometimes it has that little bug where it detects your own user's keyboard, and if it does, it has that little issue. But if you build one on a real device, you won't have any keyboard issues. It's just solely because Xcode and the iOS simulator, it's been a bug for quite a while now, that the fact that if it detects your own computer keyboard, it won't load it up. But you can press search, disappears just like normal. So let's set up these buttons then to have all their functionality added in. So let's start with our back button then. So what we do with these is all we're pretty much doing is referencing the web view and changing or kind of calling upon one of its attributes. So to give us the ability to go back, all we simply do is type in our web view dot and then choose the go back function. It's pretty much as simple as that. But we don't want to make it as simple as that because not always are you going to have the ability to go back. What if your user, open up the web view and press the go back button? It's not really going to go anywhere, is it? So what we're going to do is just double check that they can go backwards. So we can create an if statement for if our web view dot can go back, then perform an action. The action we're going to perform is to get our web view to go back. That's simply all we're doing. We're checking if they can go back first. And if they can, then let them go back. Else, if they can't go back, then the button really won't do anything. It's just a way to safeguard the application and make sure the functionality is set up correctly. Now, we do the same functionality for our go forward. So we do if our web view dot can go forward, then inside of it, we call upon our web view to dot go forward. Simple as that. Now the other two, the refresh and stop loading, we can't really do the functionality for them because it doesn't have the option to give it to us, which is kind of unfortunate. So these ones are just basically web view dot reload for the refresh, and then for stop loading our web view dot stop. There we go, stop loading, there we go. So them two, we can't really add that kind of cool functionality to kind of double check it. But for the most part, that's all we need to do for adding in those functions. So we just call upon the web view and then triggering one of its attributes to go back, go forward, reload, or stop loading. So if we go to build and run now then, we can now deeply search the web and have the ability to go back, forward, refresh, even stop loading the page. So if I typed into kind of Google here, Apple, which we now got another bug popping up, the fact that I can't type now. So now the interface has decided that it can't find my keyboard, which is, it's always hilarious, but we'll search that then. Apple goes here, and if I press the back button, it takes us back to Google. If I go forward, it takes us to Apple. If we go to the official Apple website now, it loads up, I can refresh it, and you see the page refreshes. Now I can't really show you the stop loading because it just happens too quick. Apple loads their websites too quick. But I can go backwards all the way back to Google. It's pretty cool, isn't it? So now that we've got the basis and the foundation set up for our application now, we're ready to move on to the next lecture where we're going to talk all about using activity indicators. Now activity indicators allow us to show the user activity happening on the screen. So if you've ever been on a normal web browser or application or whatever it may be, where you go to search something and you get a little loading bar or a little egg timer pop up, that's pretty much what an activity indicator does. It simulates to our user that something is happening on the screen, and we're going to implement this into our WebView application in the next lecture.